Hi, Misha here, and this is a video I've really wanted to do and have been excited to do for quite a while, and finally the final piece I was waiting on came in. You know, when you think of the original Alien film, you think of the titular alien, the xenomorph, who was definitely cool, designed by H.R. Giger. You also have to think of Ripley, Kane, the facehugger, the Nostromo. And all of those are valid things. When you think of aliens, you think of the Colonial Marines and Newt and the Queen and the Sulaco. Cool again. But from the very beginning, from the very first time I saw the Alien film, home VHS, shitty tape, horrible tracking, rented from the store, I was always fascinated by the unnamed and pretty unknown alien species and their ships. And in this video, we're going to talk about them. And everything here is new except this ship here. This is the EAglemoss quote-unquote derelict from the 1979 film Alien. It's a die-cast model, pretty good size, maybe 8-9 inches long. And I've had this for a while, and a long time ago did a video on it. When I handled this was the first time I had any idea what the derelict looked like. Never had a toy or a model as a kid, and when I first got it, it kind of looked like something the cat sicked up. Likewise, I had no idea what its pilot looked like. So this has been an adventure for me, and I want to take you along with me, give my thoughts, impressions, what I thought these things looked like, and what they actually look like, and am I disappointed or actually more excited? And I'm going to discuss what little info and lore we have using both the original 1979 film and the 2012 film Prometheus, which, yes, I actually enjoyed. And to make sure I wasn't crazy, I asked my cousin Fox. He also enjoyed it. It's not Alien, it's different. And obviously, me being blind, I liked it because it's very dialogue driven. Also, it has some pretty cool sound and music cues. Anywho, let's put the derelict on the spinny thing and go over it real quick. And then we'll move on to unseen models and figures and things. You know, it has been a minute since we had something on the old spinny thing. Held up pretty good for a cheap piece of plastic I bought at a cake store. Let's talk about the in-universe first. This is, of course, what the crew of the Nostromo discover on LV-426. It sends out what they think is a distress call. This, of course, as we know, it's actually a warning, stay the fuck away call, but I should have known that. Anywho, and they suit up, 3 of them, Dallas, Lambert, and Kane, and get on board. And at first, it kind of hides in the terrain. Part of it's the atmosphere, part of it's not a conventional shape. It's a pretty good sized ship, too. But it's also asymmetric. For example, you see there's obviously the 2 prongs in the horseshoe shape. One of them is just over 161 meters. The other one is a little over 174 meters. So, over a dozen meters difference in length. At the tightest point, it's about 61 meters across, and at the widest point, it's a little over 116 meters across. And it has no visible engines and things like that. The only things you really can see, very much on ground level or surface level, there are 3 open holes or portals, or as I think it's Kane speculates in the movie, maybe airlocks intentionally left open during an emergency. The only other thing of potential note is back here in the center part. There's kind of a little dome area. Looks kind of like an eye. And there's little kind of nodules on the sides of the things that could be engine pods or fuel pods. It very much has an organic look. Very, very non-standard. And that's really all we know about it. It's discovered by the Nostromo in 2122. They were sent there in a rather duplicitous manner by the corporation, Weyland-Yutani. Years later, it's rediscovered in 2137 by another ship. This would be in the game Alien Isolation. Obviously, I haven't played it. And they're actually the ones that shut off the beacon. And so it went quiet. So when they were doing the Hadley's Hope processing error reclamation, it was just kind of ignored. Part of it was just hidden by the terrain and the upheaval. Part of it is there had been an earthquake or a volcanic thing where it kind of got partially buried. So in the 2160s and 70s, no one really knew it was there until Ripley was discovered, and during her inquest or trial, Burke gleaned information and used that in 2179, sent Russ and Ann Jordan out to the coordinates, but didn't tell them what was going on, which led to that whole thing. And then finally, in everyone's favorite game, Colonial Marines, a little bit later, Weyland-Yutani themselves set up a facility in and around it called the Origin Facility to study both the alien eggs and what was inside. And eventually it will be destroyed. How old is it? Did it crash? Did it land? How many crew did it have? We don't really know, and that's what's really charming about it. So before we go inside, let's talk about the real world. Ridley Scott knew he wanted something very alien. Not alien like, Klingons or Romulans from Star Trek, or even some of the crazier things from Farscape, or, alien. And he went to 3 or 4 rounds of designers early on in the film, and they didn't make bad sketches, but they weren't what he was looking for. They were conventional. They were identifiable as ships. He didn't want that. Maybe he saw his cat yak something up and thought, could that be a ship? Well, finally in 1978, he turned to H.R. Giger, who had just really finished doing the Alien, the Xenomorph. And you might not know it by looking at it, because there aren't penises and vaginas clearly visible on this. Maybe people are kind of overstating Giger's, use of sex organs. Maybe it's just a one-off thing. What do you think? So Scott told him in just a few hours, this is essentially what Giger sketched out. And Scott loved it. He knew that that's it. That's what we want. That's what we need to do. And they did it. And a roughly 4-meter studio model was built with pretty good detail, which is a bit of a shame because it doesn't really show up too well in the film, so I'm told. And it was made out of typical stuff at that day and time. Some wood, resin, polystyrene, some tubing, metal supports, because 4 meters, not small. Everything had a lot of detail in the original Alien. Most things in Ridley Scott films do, which is why I do like Prometheus, amongst other reasons. And we spend a little time in it. It's fast, more than an away team mission from Star Trek, but I don't know, that's maybe my favorite part of the film. And them landing, going inside, Decane getting face hugged. By the way, they built 150 eggs, most of them static, but 1 or 2 actual functional ones to do. And of course, as is famously known, essentially the whole thing they tried to cut or scale back from the studio, and to some extent they did. For example, the original system was to have this ship and then a pyramid as a separate structure, or underneath it. The pyramid was ixnayed, and that's how the eggs ended up in the cargo hold. That wasn't the original intention. The original intention was this had crash landed or stopped to repair or whatever on LV 426 and met the Xenomorphs. By the way, LV stands for Life Viable. Even though obviously it needed work, a few decades of terraforming and you could breathe the air. Interesting thing, and very, very peculiar. with that, let's go inside. This might just be the heaviest thing I've ever put on the spinny thing. Also from EAglemoss. And thank God this isn't die-cast. It's actually a type of resin. Nevertheless, it weighs a good 5 pounds. Meet the pilot. At least that's what Giger called this, because he designed it as well. It's also been known as the Navigator. And back in the day, probably the most common name was the Space Jockey. Why? I honestly have no idea, except maybe it does look like he's kind of riding. I don't know. Later on, James Cameron would actually call him the dental patient. Either way, we only had nicknames until 2012 with Prometheus, when we get, well, I guess technically another nickname, Engineer, from Dr. Shaw. We never really know what they call themselves, at least not as of 2023. And this is an interesting statuette here, because it's not just the figure, the individual, or the remains, it's the whole kind of control system. And I was surprised. The ship surprised me, and this surprised me. Of course, the real question is, does it have a penis and or a vagina? You know, at first I thought, nah. But then I read online, and I can't unsee it. Yes, this whole thing. Look at the head. Going right into his mouth. I can't unsee that. Giger. Typewriter ribbons. No one will get that reference. Except Jay would if he's watching this video. That was a funny skit. Anyway. So yeah, this is what they encounter in the control room of the ship. Or at least what they presume to be the control room. Which is actually visible on the model here. That's this kind of eye-looking area. Originally, they actually wanted to set this inside a spherical room, which actually kind of makes this make more sense. This thing looks kind of like a telescope. I've seen some people call it a gun. That makes no sense. I think it's definitely more of an astrogative device, and if he was in like a circular room with star charts everywhere, he could point at it and zoom in and out, because obviously it has lenses. Definitely looks more like a navigation device, essentially a telescope. But he is on this base that does rotate, and he's in this chair. And by he, I mean his remains. So, what do we know from the film and then real life? In the film, the crew come across this, and it's their first definitive sign of an alien organism, alien life. Long since dead. Dallas estimates that it's quote-unquote fossilized, kind of melding or joining with his chair or couch, and could have been there millions of years. No one knows what it does, and I don't think Giger designed it to have a purpose. He designed it to be alien, which is what Scott wanted, so mission accomplished. Like I said, I presume this to be a navigation device, kind of feeding in. His front half, arms and stuff, are relatively free, but then we have like these 6 things coming down, enveloping his legs, and then we have a head, and we have this trunk thing. I think originally the idea might have been that could have been part of a face hugger, but then they changed that. Then it just kind of became a trunk for the alien. Prometheus would actually change it again, but we'll get to that when we get to it. And then we do have a visible rib cage with a visible hole in it, and that is featured here. Which of course would foreshadow the chest burster. Now, this is a larger person than a human. It's estimated in the film that he's 13 to 15 feet tall. Again, his legs are kind of buried, so it's hard to tell. And overall, in the film, this whole setup was about 26 feet tall. So, big thing. That's about all they know. It's obviously the area of the distress signal, and it shows that these ships were advanced enough and their pilots, navigators, advanced enough that they really needed one person. Was he biologically connected? Was he grown or grew into? Could he get out? Why is there a hole in his chest? Obviously we know now, they didn't know then. How long had he been there? No one really knows. I will say that it's not exactly how fossilization works. I mean, he'd be in a rock and turned into stone. Petrification maybe, but even over millions of years, anything biological would have broken down. So maybe thousands of years is more apt. Also, it's hard to think of even an advanced power source, not like being powered by something external, to last millions of years. At least something that can literally broadcast into space. Not to mention the force field, or whatever that was, stasis field over the eggs they found in the cargo hold. Elsewhere in the ship, aside from this kind of crazy room, there's lots of tunnels serving as hallways, and big chamber rooms, and just weird angles and stuff. And while an interesting mystery for the crew, of course, Kane finds the eggs, and the movie progresses on to more of a horror thing. But this is really when the movie kind of peaked for me. Who is this thing? How long has he been here? What's his story? He's weird. He's different. Is that a trunk? Is he Dumbo? I thought it was so cool. So what about the real world again? Yeah, designed by Giger to be Giger-esque and weird and alien. He succeeded. I'm not even sure if he knew what this big device was. It was built as a scale thing. As is famously known, Scott had to fight to get this made and keep it in the film, along with the whole thing, the whole scene. The studio didn't see. But I really do think it's this whole part of the film that elevates it, even if you don't know it. It takes it from just a horror film to something a little more. It speaks to a larger universe. But I'll say, when I got this out of the package, I was confused, because I thought this would just literally be a skeleton with a burst open chest sitting in a chair. And while I guess technically it's what it is, I didn't expect this big thing. I didn't actually expect the telescope thing to come with it. And I didn't expect the chair to look more like a recliner or bed. He's relatively small in there. But overall, this unit is quite tall. He's, I don't know, good at the top. Maybe not a foot, but getting close to it. And of course, side to side, it's big. The real prop was kind of the same thing. You had some metal tubing where needed. The base did rotate, by the way. It had wood, styrofoam, plaster, resin, that kind of thing. And so it was created as a scale thing for the guys to walk up to. It could be rotated around for different filming. They would actually use the same room later for the egg chamber, so they had to redress it, because again, it's a 1979 budget. Alien was not a known thing. Ridley Scott was still a young, relatively unproven director. So it's actually a wonder they did something so crazy with it. But by bringing in Giger, he already had a reputation. He definitely gave the film a unique feel. And I think he's neat. And you don't even know what's really going on. Cool beans. So which name do you like? Pilot, navigator, space jockey, dental patient? How do you like the newer engineer? I think my favorite's the navigator. Seems to speak to him really well with this big thing. And I never really thought about this being a suit or him. You know, what's going on. Of course, we leave him very briefly. And in Aliens, we don't see him. We do actually see the Juggernaut, as it's later known, the Derelict, as it's sometimes known, or just the engineer ship. We do see it in Aliens, or at least in the extended edition, the director's cut. So that's a good segue point to talk about what happened to the real models. Let's take this off of the stand. This is one of the few EAglemoss models that actually has a small hole. They really try to avoid that, but here they didn't. It's relatively heavy metal, but then it goes to plastic for these arms. So most of your weight's in the back. So this is used in the film, and then sometime later it was sold off and went into a private collection in the USA. And, you know, they didn't know they were going to make another film. But when they were doing it in 1985, James Cameron, or at least one of his people, asked the owner of the 4-meter model if they could come to the US. They didn't want to bring it to England for risk of damaging it or losing it. Yeah, even back in the 80s, the mails was shit. So they wanted to come and film it again. And they did. Unfortunately, initially, those scenes with the Jordans were left on the cutting room floor. But fortunately, they were added back in 1989 with the extended edition. So it does appear in the second film, at least briefly, which just adds some nice continuity. So it survived quite well. Unfortunately, the space jockey statue, remember it's just kind of styrofoam, wood, plaster, it burned down. Someone left a lit cigarette on it and poof. Even if it hadn't been, it probably would have been destroyed or otherwise lost or damaged because it was so big. I mean, 4 meters is one thing, but you know, this thing was getting up towards 10 meters tall and even wider and spinning base, and it was heavy, so it's hard to think they would have saved it because, again, no one knew. In fact, the studio kind of thought Alien was a one-off. Yeah, it made money, but they thought it was a fluke, kind of taking advantage of the Star Wars era. They really didn't expect Aliens to take off the way it did, so they probably would not have taken much time with it. But for decades, this is all we knew about this species. This one dead fossilized guy and this one mysterious, weirdly shaped ship. Which is why when Prometheus was announced, I was actually quite excited. And I wasn't disappointed. Mysteries. They're a true catch-22. We love them as humans. It gets our brains spinning and they terrify and delight. We can envision so many possibilities and things. They're mysterious. But we crave an answer. We love mysteries, but we want them to be destroyed. We want to know. And even if what we know ends up being a really good answer, interesting, thought-provoking, with that mystery gone, we miss it. So, when something has been a mystery for so long, was intended to be mysterious from its very inception, any answer will feel like a bit of a letdown, or at least anticlimactic. And I think that's what a lot of people felt with Prometheus. On the other hand, we weren't spoon-fed all the answers with the engineers. There wasn't an info dump. But, yeah, we did finally get to meet some. So let's move into the 21st century. So we go from this to this. This is the 7-inch scale engineer figure from NECA, although in that scale he ends up being about 8.5 inches tall. And this is the so-called pressure suit version. I'm not going to recount the plot of Prometheus. Needless to say that in the year 2093, the ship USCSS Prometheus goes to LV-223, which is a different moon from LV-426, but in the same Zeta Reticuli system, also known as the folks who abducted Betty and Barney Hill. And we do see these ships. Now they are referred to, although I don't ever believe on screen, but now a name is given as the Juggernaut. Still a kind of generic name. We see several in the film. Well, we see two, and they're referred to as more. And this kind of leans into these being grown. In the original Alien film, we see kind of organic structures inside, rib cages and holes and kind of organic rounded things. And this continues with these, although maybe not quite as much in the Giger aesthetic. And they are slightly different, which means, if they're growing, just like you and I grow, we all grow. We're the same basic body plan, but different sizes, and for characteristics, some might be more symmetrical, some less, different sizes, different purposes. It really does remind me of like Farscape, the Moya growing ship. In fact, this whole system over here of him growing into the ship reminds me of Pilot from that too. Anyway, I like that series. So we see this as a return, more or less unchanged, enough for government work anyway. And, well, things don't go to plan there. We do get to meet this guy, sometimes known as the last engineer. The name engineer was given because they were said to be the ones who engineered the human race. And you might note he looks rather different. They were quite tall. In the film, he's about 9 feet tall. It's said that 10 feet is average for these, so he's maybe a shorty. So our space jockey, if he's to be believed as the same species, is maybe a large person, 13 to 15 feet. But you think about it, humans, let's say the average height is a little under 6 feet, and humans can range from up to almost nearly 7 feet and down past 5 feet and still be considered normal. So within our own size, there's a 2 foot or even greater gap. Well, if 10 feet's the average, varying from 9 to 13, it works. They have basically no hair and pretty standard human body layout. They have black eyes, kind of bluish, grayish skin, sometimes more white porcelain. But that makes sense, so we'll criticize that. But, how often does human skin color change for flushed, upset, cold, sleepy? They actually find him on the first Juggernaut. It has a control room not dissimilar to the one we see in the original Alien, but in addition, there are 4 stasis chambers, and they went into these roughly 2,000 years ago. For whatever reason, only he survives. Maybe this chambers fail. Maybe that's the kind of high end of how long they can last. Or maybe they were sick or power failure. I don't know. But he comes out of the chamber in just a fantastic mood. Don't you know? Not much to say about this figure. He's big. His joints move. He's in the pressure suit. So pretty much how we meet him when he comes out. And he did not come with any accessories. But then again, he was a normal figure. But later ones would come with these urns. They even open. You can even pull out the vials. There is a chemical name for this stuff, but the black goo works just fine. That's really more of a story for a different video topic, I believe. I thought I'd show the little urn since This actually does come with some of the engineer figures. He's neat. I like him for what it is. But yeah, he's very clearly human-esque, and definitely is not in a good mood when he gets out of bed. But he's the last one. So he doesn't look like this guy much. Well, why is that? How about this guy? Maybe a little closer to what we see. He's also a taller figure, over 9 inches, because he's in a biomechanoid, biological, mechanical suit. This confused me when I went to buy these, not being able to see pictures. They were described 2 ways: engineer in pressure suit, engineer in chair suit. So thinking pressure suit would be the one that they would go out in the environment in, because yes, and chair suit would be the one they would like sit in chairs in, like on board ships. I actually thought the guy over here would be the chair suit version, and this guy would be the pressure suit. But no, this is considered a chair suit. And that is because this is where these two kind of line up. After he wakes up and throws a fit and kills a few humans, you know, like you do, Bender would be proud. He goes to the command console, the command couch of his juggernaut, and he puts on his suit here. Apparently they've got a really good warranty because it's still working after 2,000 years. And it envelops him, or the ship envelops him kind of in it. So the two seem to be kind of working together. They hook up. And now, what was maybe originally a tusk or a trunk is part of more of a breathing system and a helmet. And you see he's got thicker legs. And he has hoses and kind of an interesting backpack. I guess that backpack would actually make sense combined with the chair, kind of fits slotting in. It said that these suits can enhance them. They're already very strong creatures, but these make them even stronger and extend their life and let them interact with their things. And the suits themselves seem to be kind of grown. They have that biomechanoid thing going on, which, to be fair, so do the xenomorphs. So yeah, this is closer to what we see in the original film. Now, why isn't he 13, 15 feet tall? That's because Ridley Scott wanted a real actor in the suit, and just couldn't seem to find a 13 to 15 foot tall actor. I don't know why. He should have just like stacked 2 regular 6-foot guys on top of each other in a trench coat. That'd work. No, he wanted a real person. They actually used Ian White, who played various Predators, including in the AVP films. In those, he was more like 7.5 foot tall, but, you know, through optical illusions and lifts and things, you can, spread that out a bit more. I get it. You know, he likes practical effects. You can't have everything. He could have made the engineer totally CGI, and then he would have been tall. It's kind of neat, though. This is actually all a separate piece with the trunk coming down. It's very asymmetrical. Has kind of a texture. And in the beginning of Prometheus, when they first come across these, they actually do mistake this for a skeleton, like had happened in the original Alien, kind of giving a nod towards that. Again, Ridley Scott is not a dumb person. Here's the head they recover. So they first think this is the head, but then they open it up in the film and realize that there's actually a engineer head inside. Of course, he's not looking so hot. Again, that gets into the vials and more of a topic for another video. He also explodes. Severed heads. Kind of a neat little accessory. This came in a pack, which was essentially a creature pack. I think they actually just call it the Deacon, but he was basically a creature pack. Anywho, so I don't show that. So that's kind of their acknowledgement of why Dallas would actually technically in the future think it was a fossilized skeleton. We still don't know for sure, even after Prometheus, even after Alien Covenant, how long the derelict had been there on LV 426, because this is taking place on a different thing. This could have been thousands of years, could have been millions, although less likely. And you might kind of meh the whole Prometheus thing for having rewrites and all that. Fair, but you know, Alien had rewrites too. That's just the reality of things. And, you know, you can look at the comics, and I want to be honest, I didn't really like their interpretations of these aliens either. One of them had these things living like 3 billion years ago. I don't think people comprehend how long ago 3 billion was. 3 million is longer than anything like humans have been alive. 3 billion? If you go back 3 billion years, Earth was basically a smoldering lava ball. Life on Earth was only really getting started then, even later. So, yeah, to say they were unchanged over 3 billion years and kicking around, it's or to say that a fossil of any type would last that long, that's not how things last. Anyway. But no, this is a little closer, and he's a cool figure. He's actually very big and heavy. And he, too, did not come with any accessories. But in the film, he jumps into his suit, jumps into his ship, and his idea is, I'm going to go to Earth and play Santa, dropping bunches of presents, i.e. those canisters, of black goo. These guys really like their black goo on Earth. And of course, he gets stopped by the Prometheus ship itself. Idris Elba. Huzzah. But I do have one accessory I want to ask your opinion on. Here we have an engineer gun, a rifle, or noodle. Looks like a pool noodle. This actually came with the Predator, but I intended to put it with this guy the whole time. Kind of suits his suit thing. My question is, which way does this go? First, is this up with the hook in the back pointing down, or is this up with it pointing up? My instinct was down. Beyond that, where does he grip it? Does he grip it back here with his dominant hand and up here with his offhand? Or does he grip it up here with his dominant hand, and does this kind of serve as a shoulder stock? Let me know how to put this in his hands, because I really don't know. It will fit. His hands are reasonably clinchy, and they actually have quite a bit of movement in them. I just don't know which way it's supposed to go. There's some greeblies in both here, so that could be a trigger, that could be a trigger. This loop on top. This almost seems like a top because there's more detail, but then you have this kind of dished out area. Would that be on the bottom or the bottom? I don't know. You know, this seems like it would be the top because there's more of a spine here. Then this points upwards. So is that maybe a stock? Yeah, let me know how this goes in his hands, please. I would appreciate your help. And then I'll display him that way. Because you know, if I put it on wrong and then do a video, someone will point it out. But yeah, the chair suit version of the engineer is still the last engineer both ways. We do see some holographic ones. And of course we see an engineer at the beginning of the film actually wearing more like Jedi robes. That'd be kind of a cool figure. Maybe I should get another pressure suit. Want him get a big Jedi robe and put it on him. What do you think? And one more NECA engineer to wrap things up. This is the so-called battle-damaged engineer from the end of the film. So after he gets in the Juggernaut, takes off, and then Prometheus crashes into it, the Juggernaut falls back. Mostly it falls back in one piece, but some break off, and he is hurt. He gets burned on his head, And he's not in a good... This guy's just not in a good mood. Period. But now he's really in a murderous rampage, which is saying a lot because he woke up in a murderous rampage. Literally, he murdered. And now he wants to murder more. Kind of a neat figure because we have a different head, open mouth, him yelling. And we have different hands, actually. Kind of cool. More of a graspy, fighty hands. This guy came in a set, which we will talk about in a black goo video. Consider doing all one big video, but nah, I think it's better to break these up a bit, don't you? So these are my 3 engineers. Again, I wouldn't mind having a robe one. It's kind of neat. NECAs are fun, inexpensive. At least they used to be. And got my EAglemoss derelict. And my space jockey. So while I might have done things a little different with the engineers with Prometheus, I'm not disappointed. It was a blank canvas, and I like that Ridley Scott tried to take it in the different, more philosophical, almost religious direction. And the messaging there was quite interesting. To me, the EAglemoss ones are really cool. I had no idea what either of these look like. But the EAglemoss stuff was pretty expensive. What were these? About 50, 60 bucks when new. These were like 79 for this size. But your NECAs, oh, they were, what, 19 bucks? 25? 15 on sale at a Hastings that couldn't get rid of them. Unfortunately, they haven't actually done these in a number of years. Most of them came out in 2012, 2013, and I don't believe they've done a re-release. Could be wrong, but yeah, you don't see them much anymore. Mostly they just do alien repaints and more of the same. There's a lot of Predators though, that's cool. And of course they've kind of merged all these universes, Alien, Predator, Prometheus, which is actually again where this gun comes from. The Fire and Ice comics, where there is Ahab, the Predator who does not care for engineers, or at least wants to hunt one. And considering their grumpy attitude, I don't blame him. They make Predators look chipper. But yeah, if you could let me know how this goes in his hands, I'd be much obliged. Yep. So, let me know what you think. Let's have a fun discussion. I enjoyed it. I wished Alien Covenant had kind of kept on with the Prometheus direction. I think if we'd been able to really see where Ridley Scott was going with it, it would have been interesting. I didn't hate Covenant, but it has that mid-stream course correction thing going on that just stinks. I don't know, though. It's just me. But I am happy to know what these look like, finally. Yeah, these are a little more human than I expected, but the trunk's cool. And if you're going to do an actor in a suit, there's only so much you can do. And considering the connection to humanity that's made with these aliens and us in the film, it's logical. And we still don't know anything about them, if they're still around, what happened. Are they factional? Is it maybe the guy just went mad after cryosleep? I mean, that would be one explanation, that maybe, oh yeah, don't you know, after 500 years they live, but their brains rot away. Who knows? Maybe he was already being affected by the black goo and it just wasn't evident, because we just see him for a brief time. But, yeah, just felt like sharing with these. Feel free to discuss below. And I've done a video on Alien and Aliens, a couple of those. Check those out. And we'll go into the black goo very soon. Doesn't that sound exciting? This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.